Hi guys. So this is my first video back after several months. Some of you may have noticed, but the reason I've been absent for so long is because I had a full anterior hip replacement on my right side. So that happened in December of 2021. It's now April, the end of April 2022. So we're talking, approximately 5 months ago, I got it done. So what I want to do in this video is going to be obviously a little bit different from what we normally post on the FIGHTNESS channel. But I want to talk about that experience a little bit and show you some footage of what my training looks like now, 5 months after the surgery. Just basically some solo training, that kind of thing, to show you what, if you're going through something similar and you may need to have a hip replacement or are considering it, what you might expect up to this point anyway. I'm definitely not back to, full speed training at this point, but I'm getting there slowly but surely. I think I will get back to maybe not to 100% of what I was before having hip problems, but hopefully close. Hopefully I do get back to 100%, even beyond. But definitely I'm still early in the process now, but I do want to show you some of that video so you can get an idea from the perspective of a mixed martial artist. So I've seen other videos out there on YouTube and elsewhere about this topic and what to expect, but mostly they're from the perspective of a single style martial artist, either traditional striking martial artist or a grappler. For me, I didn't find anything out there about mixed martial arts. So I've been training in a variety of different martial arts for like 26 years now. I started when I was 15 years old. I'm now 41. And that's probably part of the reason why I needed a hip replacement. The reason I had to get the hip replacement is, after years of martial arts training, of playing other sports, of, doing heavy barbell lifts, things of that nature, and all that kind of repetitive task stuff, I developed osteoarthritis in both my hips. I'll probably actually end up getting the left hip done at some point in the future. You're gonna notice that in the video. I'm still a little bit hobbled there also. But after all that, years of doing that, I developed osteoarthritis. I had labral tears, which I still have on the left side, impingements, all kinds of, complications that, I came to the conclusion that, I was just going downhill in terms of my abilities, and I was just, not able to sleep at night. I had pain, all during the day. Just walking was becoming difficult. So I came to the conclusion it was time to do the replacement. I tried everything else. I tried the anti-inflammatories. I tried the cortisone shots. They were not successful. So eventually hip replacement was the only option, really. So far, so good, though, I have to say afterwards. Again, what I had was the anterior approach hip replacement with a the implant is actually what's called it's a full hip replacement. I didn't get a partial or a resurfacing, anything like that. I got it in a full hip replacement, and the actual device is what's called a dual mobility hip joint, with a ceramic head on it as opposed to metal on metal. It's got ceramic and metal, and I believe there's a plastic piece in there as well. But the dual mobility joint is supposed to provide you with a little bit more mobility, post-operation, and lesser likelihood of a dislocation, which is possible if you had your hip replaced. So, in any case, that's kind of the background here. With that being said, I want to go into review, kind of an analysis in some of my current training, so you can see what things look like and where your sticking points might be in the future if you go through a similar process. All right, enjoy. Okay, we're starting with boxing. Starting with boxing mainly because that was the first thing I could return to after my hip surgery. Here I'm doing a drill called boxing counter combinations. I find that offensive combinations are easier to throw. Whereas here with the counter combinations, what I'm first doing is either a slip, roll, duck, or some kind of evasive maneuver or a block followed by a combination. So that it's that initial slip, roll, the evasion that's a little bit difficult, more difficult than an offensive combination. Like there, you see my roll is a little bit stilted. It's because your hips are involved in that, especially to the right. You see that there. Rolling out to the right is a little more difficult to the left for me right now. Here, I'm doing some stance switching offensive boxing counter combos. Like I said, offensive combos are a little easier because you don't have that initial, evasive maneuver. But one of the issues that I'm finding is with my stance switching is and sometimes when I switch stances, it's because I want to be able to get around to the outside of my opponent's guard, to that right side, when I go southpaw like that. But I'm finding it hard because my right leg had the surgery, hard to move out to the right side. Here I'm starting to incorporate some elbows and headbutts. So this is a freestyle striking counter combinations drill. I've left out the legs. Normally I would do knees and kicks in this as well, but here I'm not up to speed on that yet. So I'm just throwing in the elbows. What I notice with the elbows when I'm throwing them is that throwing an elbow requires more torso rotation than a punch, just because you don't have the arm out there extended as much. So as a result of that need to rotate the torso and use a little bit more footwork to land the elbow, I find that gives me a little more pain. Okay, next thing I was able to go into is some ground grappling technique. I'm here just doing some ground grappling fundamental movements. So you see that I'm doing some bridging, over bridging, and under bridging there. One of the problems I've had there, mostly I'm able to do almost all the necessary movements, basic grappling movements on the ground, but just not as well as I normally would be able to because the hip is just impeding my movement. It's very stiff. So you have to do a lot of work to try to loosen that up. So one thing I notice here, like you see me doing shrimping, especially this flat, knee elbow escape shrimping, that requires a lot of hip movement rotation. That's pretty difficult. Also, getting the hips high on the bridge is a little bit more difficult. Here, doing things like rolling, your hips aren't really involved that much, so it's no problem. Here's an example. If I'm doing a sit out, you just got to be careful that you're not banging your hip against the ground, banging that prosthesis against the ground. That can, give you some trouble. Here you see I'm doing a mount armbar spin drill. One of the issues I've had there is I just can't keep my hips as low as I'd like to, as low as I'd normally be able to execute that armbar. The butt, I can't get my butt as close to the ground as I want to be. Here's some spin rolls. No real problems there because again the hips aren't necessarily as involved as much. Here you're keeping the hips pretty straight, so when that's not an issue. From an open guard. This also has not been much of an issue except for extending the hips at the top of the movement. Here, when you're doing some torso rotations like this or some hip rotations, you got to be really careful not to bang your hip against the ground. Okay, and then I started incorporating some striking, ground striking, with my grappling. You'll see some knees there as well. Surprisingly, I thought the knees would hurt when I started throwing them. They weren't that bad. I didn't have too much of a problem there. Moving around and transitioning on the ground, like I said, all those ground grappling fundamental movements, haven't had too much of a problem there, except to the extent that I can extend my hips. So I can basically execute the movements, but just not as good as I normally would be able to. So you got to keep working on that. Keep trying to stretch the hips out and get them to the point where they once were. There you see me going from the Kimura stepping over the head, for example. There, I can't get my hips as low as they need to be. I'm kind of like high on the opponent. But generally speaking, any kind of ground grappling movements like this and the striking on the ground, I haven't had much problem with. So this is something you can start incorporating after the boxing. And the basic fundamental movements on the ground, which you want to start out with slowly and do very technically. Okay, here I'm showing a little bit of stand-up striking, footwork, evasions, and blocking. So lateral movements like this are difficult, right? And they're more difficult than linear movements like you're seeing here, moving forward and backwards. But changing direction is much slower than it normally would be at this point for me. All right, so when you reach that end point of your movement, you want to go back in the other direction. You got to just be real careful and go slower. Same thing here, ducking, slipping, and rolling while moving. I just have to do it slower than I normally would be able to. My hips just are too tight. They haven't been able to get back to full speed on it yet. That being said, I can execute the movement. I can do it. It's just not as smooth and fluid as fast as it would normally be yet. Going into something here like blocking, this is not an issue. The upper body blocking, with the arms, various types of blocks and movements, evasions, etc. All right, it's when you start to get into some knee blocking here, right, where initially this was very difficult. Just even raising the right leg at all was difficult. But you see, after 4 months, I'm able to execute my knee blocks pretty efficiently. Here I started incorporating some stand-up grappling. There you see a sprawl and some knees on the bag. Knees on the bag don't really hurt that bad. They're not an issue. One thing you notice with my sprawl there is I can't get my hips all the way down towards the ground like I normally would. That's also because of my lower back, the way I have herniated discs in my lower back. Here you see the kicks on the back, right? When I'm kicking off the back, normally I would throw that as a side kick, but rolling all the way onto my side and then being able to shoot that side kick out and straight is difficult. We're going to talk more about kicks in a little while. But I still can execute the techniques. Here, starting to look at some stand-up grappling fundamental movements. Here's what I was talking about. When you do a breakfall, turn to your side and do a side kick, you got to do that nice and slow. You just don't have the snap that you normally would, and you don't get the full extension that you normally would. The kicking has definitely been the most difficult part for me to get back, as we'll talk about later, especially when you see the stand-up kicking. But other than that, stand-up grappling fundamental movements like this are the next thing I added in. This surprisingly, a forward slap out roll I thought would be difficult, but it was actually pretty easy as long as you're doing it smoothly. You're not banging your hip on the ground, and you can actually get through it without a problem. Backwards rolls, no problem. Okay, here we'll start to see drop steps. Drop steps, although at this point I can execute them, again, just not as well as I normally would be able to. One thing you're going to notice is that trailing leg on the drop step. Usually I would be able to leave that straight and kind of drag it across the ground and cover more ground with it. But here I kind of almost have to do like a secondary step with that rear leg to keep my hips closer together, just because the flexibility isn't back yet. All right, so I can execute the movement, but I can't go as low and fast as I'd normally be able to here. Here you're seeing a surprise double leg throw exercise, and what I'm doing basically, this was like a self-defense movement, but you'll see that I can't get my hips that low. All right, similarly here with a fireman's carry type movement, I can't get the hips as low as I would like them to be. This is actually more difficult than the double leg throw movement, though, because there's an unilateral aspect to it. Talk about more of that in a minute. Here, if you're seeing shoulder throw technique, fit-ins and shoulder throw squats here, not too bad actually. In that, because when I'm squatting down, it's a bilateral movement. You're symmetrical with your hips. The problem I've noticed when doing this is that the balance that I normally have is not there. So I can get into the position, but there, like for example, you see me kind of like tilt backwards. My hips aren't, the balance isn't back where it needs to be yet. All right, so here's the big question, the kicking, right? So kicking is the hardest part by far, right? Getting the technique back. The front kicks are the easiest to get back so far. So this is what you're seeing here. That side kick is absolute crap. Right at this point, like what you saw there, you can't get the full extension, you can't get any speed. That rear side kick was horrible. The hips are just too tight to articulate them on the side is very difficult. You saw that there with that roundhouse kick, that lead leg roundhouse, and that rear leg roundhouse. Similarly, they both look like crap at this point. I can't chamber the kick. I can't get the height I need. Or the power. The hip just will not articulate the way it needs to yet. There you saw some hook kicks. The hook kicks are surprisingly not that bad because the hip's going in the other direction. Here we saw crescent kicks. The crescent kicks are not too difficult. It's just that I don't have the height back yet to hit. With a crescent kick, by definition, you got to smack somebody in the face. So I can't get those crescent kicks, either the inside or the outside, up to the head level yet. But they don't give me pain. All right, it's just that I don't have the flexibility yet, because all the muscles around the hips are tightened up after the surgery. They're just like they automatically do that. Your body does that. Was not something I expected after surgery, but it's there. It's like you're starting from scratch in terms of getting your flexibility. Despite the linear flexibility is not as bad. There's just some axe kicks there, but they just don't have the height and the extension they need to have. Definitely the lateral kicks, like the side kicks and the roundhouse kicks, are by far the most difficult for me so far. I just cannot get them back to where they need to be. I shouldn't say that. That spinning kick was also horrendous. But I can do it. I don't have the height. Now, the spinning heel kicks or spinning hook kicks that you saw were worse though than that last spinning back kick, because it's more linear. It's that circular movement that's the most difficult. All right, guys. So there you have it. That's what my solo training looks like to this point. I really haven't done anything beyond solo training yet. I don't think I'm ready for it yet. The hip's just not back to where it needs to be. My technique is not back where it needs to be. And it's funny, one of the things I didn't get to say during the analysis there is that, when you first come out of that hip replacement, that surgery, this is something I didn't realize going into it. It's basically like you have to reteach your body from scratch. It's like you're starting out as like it's your first day of martial arts. I mean, the stuff is in your head, but your body does not know how to do it anymore. Especially when it comes to your hips. You have to basically like relearn every little muscle movement. So you have to, initially, remember, this is 4.5 months. These videos were taken in a couple of workouts I did about 4.5 months after the surgery. So, but between then and this video, I mean, there was a lot of work to be done in terms of physical therapy, in terms of gradually getting back to the point of what you see here, and I'm still not close to where I want to be, but I do see improvement, so I can see this going in the right direction. I can tell you that it's just been taking a lot of work. Another thing I would note is that another thing I didn't expect. So basically, you're reteaching your body how to do things, like literally walking, literally just like picking your leg up is difficult initially, but it comes back pretty quickly, as long as you're diligent about the physical therapy and exercising. So stick with that aspect of it. And I also noticed that flexibility. My flexibility was basically like gone after the surgery. I used to be able to do full splits, or at least near full splits, and that is like gone now. So I basically I've had to start from scratch in terms of regaining my flexibility. That's one of the reasons the kicks at the end of there look so horrible. There's just no flexibility. So I'm gradually regaining that. Just in the last couple weeks since these videos were taken, I've already seen improvement, because I'm doing a lot of focused stretching, especially on the hip joints, the smaller muscles of the hip joints. So I'm seeing progress there. One thing I would tell you is that if you like this video, please subscribe to FIGHTNESS, to the YouTube channel, and hit the like button. I am going to be putting out an entire series actually about of workouts, a workout program, and the workout program I'm using to recover from the hip replacement, and it's specifically for mixed martial artists. So obviously you want to talk to your doctor before you go through that and doing that, but in the coming weeks and months, you're going to see it's basically going to be a 6 months or so program, workout by workout, exercise by exercise, how to get back to fighting shape after having the hip replacement. I'm not there yet, but I'm just going to share my journey with you as we go. So if you want to see that, subscribe to the channel, and hope you enjoyed this.